Sometimes the best things we can do for kids have absolutely nothing to do with curriculum. Welcome to Hack Learning. It's what you can do tomorrow. I'm your host, Mark Barnes, and today I want to talk about something that is so simple, so hacky, that it's often overlooked. And that's really what hack learning is about. Solving problems that often have a solution that is right there in front of us. In fact, sometimes it's so close that we look past it for the more complex solution. I have a story I want to share from Quiet Kids Count, Unleashing the True Potential of Introverts by Chrissy Romano. And this is part of the Lead Forward series, new from Times 10 Publications. And while this is not a hack learning book, and most of our episodes are derived from our hack learning series, this is still something that has a hack, that simple solution to a problem that we often overlook. And I want to share a brief story from Chrissy Romano's Quiet Kids Count. And this goes a long way then to helping us see this very simple solution that really has nothing to do with academics. Chrissy shares a story in her book about a student she calls James, a fourth grader who is struggling with anxiety and introversion and some things that really aren't that difficult to solve, but are often overlooked by teachers because we're so consumed with academics and with testing and with all of the other things that are involved in being a teacher. And I know that is a lot. Listen to what Chrissy says about how she handled James, who was struggling, who wouldn't engage in class, who was quiet, and who's just really wasn't reaching his true potential. Chrissy had a talk with James, and it was one-sided. It was her sort of talking at him, and this is what she says. After a few minutes, I saw that the conversation was one-sided and not going anywhere, so I made a small request of James. I asked him to spend time over the weekend thinking about what I could do to help him and what we could do together to make each day more meaningful for both of us. Monday came, and James quietly slipped me a letter he had written. It was the most time and effort he had put into anything during the year. He told me about a middle school student who was bothering him every day as he walked to and from school. He went on to describe how it triggered his anxiety and made him angry. He spent most of his morning trying to snap out of the funk from his walk to school and the rest of the day worrying about the walk home. He also shared with me that he missed his dad and hadn't seen him in a long time since his parents split up. All of this was exhausting to him. No wonder he just wanted to hang out in our classroom during lunch and listen to music. It turned out his disinterest and lack of engagement had nothing to do with me or what was happening in our class each day. After I heard about his daily struggles, we talked again at lunch. I asked for help from the school social worker, and we came up with a plan to get him a ride to and from school so he could start and finish his day without the stress of the unwanted attention of that middle school boy. As far as making him a more active member of our classroom community, we came up with an agreement to use a signal to give him a heads up when it was his turn to answer a question or explain how he solved a math problem. In addition, I shared with him my story of how I had to be the first one to answer or ask a question in class when I was a kid, and that I still use that strategy to overcome my anxiety as an adult. After a few weeks, I started to see a turnaround in James. There was still a lot of work to do, and he continued to shy away from working with a team, but he was coming to school with a smile each day. In his way, he was slowly becoming a member of our classroom community instead of hanging out on the fringes. And Chrissy begins this story about those fringes where James and many introverts hang out. And as I said in the open, this is a simple solution, a hacky way to solve a really big problem with something that is super simple. there's a whole lot of things that Chrissy could have done to reach James. One is, if he's not engaging, she could have threatened him with a loss of participation points. A horrible strategy that many teachers still employ because that's the way we've always done it, right? And Chrissy actually addresses that in another chapter in her book, Quiet Kids Count. But I think that that's something that we often default to as teachers. This idea that, well, if we punish a kid with a grade, that'll be incentive for them to do something. And that really never works. She could have changed his seat and put him at the front right by her. And that's another old school strategy that I think we often default to because still that is something that is still being taught to educators in their pre-service days, that proximity thing. And there are times when that'll work, but this wasn't one of them. Think about what Chrissy did with James. And it's so simple and so powerful. The thing she did was she built trust with him. She pulled him aside. She talked to him. She asked him what was wrong. Think of the simplicity of asking the question. We don't do that nearly enough. She made a connection outside of curriculum and academics and the kinds of things that kids equate teachers with that are often negative. And she humanized James and herself, and that brought them to a place where a problem could be solved. It brought them to a place where James was willing to open up and to explain the problems that he had, problems we don't see, something going on outside of the classroom that impacts his learning inside. And that is such an important thing. Chrissy also told a story about herself that helped James identify with her. She says throughout her book, Quiet Kids Count, she references herself as an introvert, someone who had to come up with strategies to cope with her own issues in the classroom. One of them we talked about in a prior episode on Hack Learning was that strike first approach to say, I'm afraid to engage and talk, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan what I'm going to say, and I'm going to strike first. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to jump in early, and that way I'm participating. She shares that strategy with James. She also gives him a simple signal. Now, teachers have learned this, I know, but this is one of those that a reminder is important. This is a strategy we need to be reminded of no matter what grade or subject we teach. Just a nonverbal cue to go to an introverted kid like James who's afraid to engage and to say, I'm going to call on you, but I'm going to give you a little signal. Or I want you to jump in, to strike first. And I'm going to give you that signal reminder that you should do that. You think of these simple strategies, building rapport, connecting with a student, sharing your own story, creating a connection. And that's really one of the most important strategies in this section of Quiet Kids Count that Chrissy Romano shares. This is a chapter called They Need to Feel You to Hear You. And it's so important. And there are more stories and strategies about this in this chapter. I hope you will check out Quiet Kids Count by Chrissy Romano. This is book 3 in the Lead Forward series, a new series from Times 10 that I think is in the tradition of Hack Learning. It's not the exact format, but it still provides amazing stories and powerful, practical strategies that any teacher can use to help our kids be better. And it isn't always about academics. Quiet Kids Count is about reaching the introverts, the quiet kids, kids with anxiety, those in the background who have so much to offer, but often go unnoticed. Hey, I'm Mark Barnes, and you are listening to the Hack Learning Podcast. And for more episodes, please go to hacklearningpodcast.com. And thank you so much for listening.